Hey, welcome back to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. We've got a very exciting guest for you today, but even more exciting, the podcast is going international. We're taking it out of the States. We're going up a little bit to the neighbors to the north, Canada. My friend Ernie Schraymayr here, he's a really interesting guy, super positive. Glad to have him on. He's got a great story and some interesting perspective on things. But so what he is, the main thing, he's a medical exercise specialist, a great trainer. We met through the Adventure Boot Camp family back in the day. Super positive guy, like I said. He's got a couple kids, he's married, and we're just going to get into kind of how he grew up and some interesting questions. But Ernie, thanks for being on here, man.
Thanks, Joe. It's long overdue. I feel like we're old pals, even though we only know each other from being online and talking that way. But yeah, this is great. I've been following your podcast for a while and listening to it, and I love it, man. It's you got the right name for it anyway. The Relentless Positivity. It's great.
I think the world needs some of that right now. So we're gonna do some of that. But Ernie gave me a great opportunity to be a part of an article that he writes for the local newspaper up there, and I got a chance to write an article with him, and it was a great experience. I got great feedback from people in his state over there, and I really appreciate that. So I wanted to return the favor and have him on. So tell me, so where'd you grow up? Where were you born?
So I was born in Montreal, Quebec. So I'm not French Canadian, but I grew up in Quebec, which is mostly French, but in somewhat English area. My parents were, so I'm a first generation Canadian, first generation Quebecer. My parents were immigrants from Germany and Austria. They immigrated to Canada after World War II. They met in Montreal, actually, so they didn't come together. So they came separately and just had a chance meeting there. So I was born in Montreal. I've grew up playing sports like crazy. You know, it's not even a question of whether I played hockey. I mean, you play hockey. If you're in Montreal, you play hockey. So I played hockey. I played football. I have two sisters, so one older, one younger, and we were even in ski school, believe it or not. So every weekend we get picked up by a bus and we go off to do school. So to learn skiing half the day and then to be free skiing the rest of the day. So
that's how I picture Canadians, by the way. I picture you guys all going to skiing school and hockey school and all that stuff.
Well, in Quebec, especially where I grew up, in less than an hour, I mean, you're in the Laurentians, which is the mountain range there. And where I live now, I'm in Hamilton, Ontario. So I'm in southern Ontario, which is a much more the winters aren't quite as severe as they were in Quebec in the 70s anyway. So to go skiing, I got to drive like 2.5 hours to get to a somewhat decent hill. From Montreal, we'd get picked up by a school bus, and an hour later we were in a range. We had a whole choice of all different mountains. So it was a big being outdoors and being active like that was always a big thing. Both also for my parents. My dad grew up in the area like where Sound of Music was filmed. So he grew up in the Alps. My mom grew up in Nuremberg in Germany. So yeah, I was in Quebec for my whole life until when I was 19. I got a scholarship to go to Purdue University, and I played football at Purdue for 4 years. I never even redshirted. I started as a freshman, believe it or not.
How'd you get recruited to Purdue? How'd they find out about you?
It's a pretty good story. So my first year playing football, I was an underage kid. So it was the age group was 7 to 9, but we snuck in there just before I was 6 3/4, I guess. And I was overweight as a kid. I was chubby. My mom dragged me. She saw the kids at the park running around, and she might have thought that football was soccer. I don't know, because she's from Germany, but she saw the kids running around and doing jumping jacks and all that. So she dragged me up to the park. I was a really, really shy kid, and I never spoke in school or anything. And she dragged me up screaming and crying, and she dragged me up there. And the coach, I looked from 6-year-old, the coach is this enormous African-American gentleman, and he's looking at it. His voice was the deepest voice you ever heard. And he was the coach of the team. So his name was Wally Highsmith. He was playing at the time for the Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League. But before that, he was a Houston Oiler, I believe. He played in the not the USFL, but he played in the NFL. But then there was another. What was the other league they had? The WFL. Anyway, his son is Alonzo Highsmith.
Okay, I was going to ask, any relation?
Yeah. So Alonzo was on the team. We were teammates when we were 6 or 7 years old.
Okay.
So Alonzo was you may remember him from University of Miami. He was the 3rd pick overall, I believe, in the NFL draft with the Oilers.
Yeah.
So Alonzo we played together. We played on the same team, but then they moved to a different park, and then we were rivals to the age of about 14. And then we played together again when we were on the city team for a couple of years. Then they moved back to Florida, and Wally became head coach of a high school in Florida. And Alonzo went down and was the star of the team, and then went on to University of Miami. But when Purdue was doing some recruiting, I guess they were recruiting at Wally's school, he mentioned me and said, "You got to go check out this kid up in Quebec, up in Canada." And so they recruited me, and they watched me for a while, and then they offered me a scholarship. So when I went to Purdue, I was the all-star, all province. The province is a state, by the way, to you guys. So I was the running back, but also I was a punter. So Purdue needed one of their punters, one of the kickers had graduated, and the other one had got kicked out of school. They needed a kicker right away. So I got a scholarship. I went there. I started as a freshman as the punter. So I punted for my first year at Purdue. They knew I wanted to play running back, and I was going to go somewhere and sign as a running back. So as in my sophomore year, I switched, and I went on. I played running back after that.
Wow.
So I played fullback. After Purdue, I was drafted by the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the Canadian Football League. So that's how I ended up in where I live now in Hamilton. I was with the Ticats for 5 years. And in my 5th year with the team, I was released and then signed by the Ottawa Rough Riders, so another franchise. Played there, but by then my business had started here. I met my wife, and she was here, and so I kind of settled here. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah. So who's the best player you ever played with? Maybe your top 3. Who's the best you played with?
Without a doubt, would be Rod Woodson.
Oh, Hall of Famer, NFL Hall of Famer.
Without a doubt, yeah. He was he was on the All-Century team. So the year that Alonzo was drafted, our quarterback was drafted. It was Jim Everett.
Oh, yeah.
So he was drafted, I think, and then I played with Jeff George. He was our quarterback for a while. Played against Jim Harbaugh, believe it or not. He was the quarterback for Michigan. There was a lot of big name guys. Keith Byers was running back for Ohio State.
I played for the Eagles for a long time too.
Remember Merton Hanks, the DB for 49ers? I was every now and then, every few years, we'll throw on an old videotape, and I was watching a game, and I run over Merton Hanks. he was the DB for Iowa.
He used to do that chicken thing with his head. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there were a lot. Yeah, we had at Purdue, we had a lot of Calvin Williams was a receiver, went on to the Eagles. I just the other night, actually, I got an email from Mark Jackson. Do you remember him?
Yeah, absolutely. I do.
With the 3 amigos from Denver. So we had a lot of big name guys. The program goes up and down. I mean, there's some teams, there's like Alabama, Ohio State. They're always going to be up there. Purdue tends to go up and down in cycles. When they had. So I was kind of at the end of a cycle with the year I was recruited and went to the Peach Bowl, and then there was a bit of a down cycle until Mike Allstott, and then Drew Brees came, and then came back up again, and but it was a heck of an experience, I tell you.
Yeah. So you started your business. What kind of business? Where did you start? How did you start your business? What did that look like when you first started?
Well, when I went to Purdue, my first 2 years, I was in what was called a supervision program, which is like professional management. Mm-hmm. And so it was economics, macro, micro, business systems, management, that kind of thing. I did it for 2 years, and I could do it. I was okay, but it really wasn't my passion. I wasn't really excited about it. And one night I looked in my dorm room, and it's a Saturday night on campus, and I'm reading Muscle and Fitness magazine, and I got a whole stack of them, and I thought maybe I should move into that direction. So I switched programs, and I ended up in what was called community health promotion. So it was learning health education protocols, and then epidemiology and things, and then also learning how to present and write and teach it. So so I ended up with a health promotion degree. When I was playing in the Canadian Football League, probably about my 3rd year in, I had started doing some. I wanted to start in corporate fitness, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I was setting up a corporate and I did an internship when I was at Purdue in corporate fitness, and I worked for a company here in Hamilton. But you never know where you're going to end up, right? So I went to the bank to set up a business bank account to set up this corporate business I was going to do. And it was, at the time, it was called All Canadian Fitness Systems, because I thought systems sounded.
Yeah. Hey, wait till you hear my business name. hold on to your seats here. If you may wish you would have named it Joe Martin Fitness. Yeah, that's it.
You want to know something? You want to know something, Joe? My business now is called Ernie Schraymayr Fitness.
There you go. See?
So so I directly took it. Your logo and everything was so good. I thought, you know what? That's what I'm going to call it. But all Canadian. So my dad lived in upstate New York, actually. So my parents, they separated and they eventually divorced and ended up remarried with new partners. But my dad lived in upstate New York, kind of near Utica for 25 years. He started a business in Montreal and then eventually became the president of a company in New York State that was part of the Fruit of the Loom company.
Okay. Yeah.
And his company did computerized sewing systems, which is pretty cool. But I used to, when I would visit him, I'd go sometimes to work out at the local gym, and it was called All American Fitness. And so when I needed a name for my business, I thought, yeah, All Canadian Fitness. Yeah. And then because I had to sound professional, I put systems at the end. I don't know what it meant. But yeah, so All Canadian Fitness Systems was where I started. And I was so I went to the bank to get a bank account to set up this company. And then when I was meeting with the bank manager, he was asking me what I do and et cetera. And, he saw that I was on the football team, and he told me about his wife who had gained 50 pounds with each pregnancy and was like 100 pounds more than when they had dated to start. So he asked me if I could work with her, and I had never thought about personal training. And I said, yeah, okay. So that was my first client. So we went from there, and then it was word of mouth. And so that was how I ended up doing personal training, just for a chance meeting from that doctor. But when I retired from football, I really, even though I had been in, I played every sport you can imagine growing up, and pretty high level, obviously, getting a scholarship and then going pro. I really did not want to work in training, sports training or performance or athletes. I was just had enough of it at that point. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to kind of move off in a different direction. And I sort of fell just by chance into the medical exercise field there. Like I said, my degree is in health promotion. Okay. So here's happenstance number 2. So number 1 was meeting that guy at the bank. Number 2, I was living with my sister, who just happened, just by chance. She was at university, McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, where I got drafted. And this is 6-7 hour drive from where we grew up. So it was just a chance we both ended up here. So I was living with her. And one night she asked me, she says, hey, let's get a pizza. This is back when you had, the yellow pages. She says, so I started looking up for pizza, and I was kind of flipping through, and somebody called me in the house. I said, what? And I stopped. Okay, yeah. And I looked back, and the page I had stopped on, there was an advertisement in the yellow pages. It said the Center for Human Performance and Health Promotion. And I thought, I've never heard of anything like that. I thought, I didn't know what it was.
Do they deliver pizza or not?
They don't deliver pizza, no. So I looked at it, I said, what the heck is that? So I phoned them. I figured, why not? I called them and I said, what do you guys do? Who are you? So it was a clinic that treats musicians and performing artists, so with arts related injuries.
Yeah.
And I'm a music nut, and I said, well, can I come meet you guys? So I met the director. He knew who I was because he was a football fan and had seen me play, and we just hit it off right away. And so I became the post rehab referral source for their clinic. And so they did, regular doctor work. They did physiotherapy. They did chiropractor, all that stuff. But then when somebody was no longer acute, they would need the bridge between that and going back to regular fitness. They would get referred to me, and I would work with them. And this was a lot of insurance work. So people who had been either musicians with overuse or who had been in accidents. And so that's where I started. So I was kind of making it up as I go. And then I realized I had to write reports for doctors in their language and for insurance companies to get funding. And the language was pretty confusing. So I signed up for the medical exercise specialty certification course and got certified as an MES back then at that point.
Yeah. Well, I'll use those big words, man. That'd be rough on me.
I just remember it was the thing that made me go, okay, I got to learn this, was genuvarum and genuvalgus.
I'm gonna Google those later when I get back.
Knock-kneed or bow-legged.
Okay, I speak those.
So genu, yeah. So there you go. So those two. So that was how I got started. That was in the early to mid 90s.
Okay. Yeah. So how I got started in adventure boot camp is kind of my dad said, you ever heard of boot camps? You'd probably be good at that. And he showed me an advertisement on the back of, I think it's a PFP magazine or something.
Yeah.
Huge adventure boot camp thing. He was just like, hey, I think you'd be really good at this. You want to look into that. And the rest is history, right? So these weird things that can happen and just change your life completely, right? And
Absolutely.
Yeah. For a magazine. Yeah. So that's,
you never know where you're gonna, that's why it's so important to just meet people, talk to people, get out there,
yeah.
Either way, get off your screen and get out there and actually meet people. Yeah.
So you started there with personal training. When did you get into groups? I know you were an adventure boot camp guy what got you into the group?
I had adventure boot camp for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how I heard about it or found out about it. I was trying at that time. So when I first started doing the work with the rehab clinic, mm-hmm. one thing I did different from a lot of what other trainers have done is I started very early on. I was contracting other trainers to do work to take my spillover.
Okay. Yeah.
So I like almost right away. I would hire somebody and then I would subcontract them to work, and then I would be the one submitting so eventually, I did that. I was on the road for 10 years with no real location, just meeting people on site at gyms and their homes and pools and sending out other trainers. So then I finally, when I decided I needed a home, I opened up a studio, and I had over the years about 25 trainers work for me. Wow. through that location. So when we were in there, we were looking for another way to make some money, another profit.
Because you had system. It was all Canadian systems. So you had to have
all exactly. Well, by then we had dropped it down to 3 words. It was just all Canadian fitness. So. But I was looking for another profit center, something else besides one-on-one training. And so like everybody that has a location and space, we started to do group training, but no real system, I just would, advertise it. It would be pretty good. It would be a few people. So I probably was online. It was early on with the internet and looking up group exercise boot camp. And I must have just come across an ad. I think the Adventure Boot Camp logo, which was like the Indiana Jones logo, grabbed me. I saw that and I looked into it. And from the very first camp, so I was, just begging people to come for like 5 or 6 groups of 5 or 6. The very first camp I did with Adventure Boot Camp, close to 40 registered.
A good start.
It was a good start. It was so I did that for 8 years and got up at 4:30 in the morning for 8 years, and by the time I got out of it, it was time for me to like REO speed. I would say it was time for me to fly.
Time for me to fly. Yeah, that's good. That's my jam. Do you watch Ozark? That's where
of course. Yeah.
So in your medical exercise specialist, what's kind of something that people they misunderstand about what you do? So they probably come in and they see you, you're a personal trainer. They probably have this in mind. What is different between personal training and what you do? Well,
the biggest misconception, the thing that people think I do and what I really do, is they oftentimes will think that I'm in the US you call it a physical therapist. In Canada it's a physiotherapist, but they'll think that I'm a physiotherapist. Mm-hmm. And so they think that I can diagnose and assess them, make a diagnosis, and then work with them on rehab. So there's a difference between being a medical exercise specialist, a personal trainer, and a therapist. So in my work, I tell people that I cannot be a diagnostician. I'm a suspectician. Okay. So if somebody's got pain underneath their kneecap, I know I've seen it for 30 years now. I know it's probably going to be patellofemoral syndrome. Probably, but it's outside of my professional scope and my ability to diagnose that. So I would refer somebody to a therapist who could so I'm able to work with the diagnosis and to work with somebody around an injury. But in my professional scope, it's never about rehabbing or doing physiotherapy for an injury. Even though a lot of what we do is very similar, there might even be the same routine, but it's not within the professional scope to work on the injury. We work around it. And so when the musicians clinic was sending people to me, they were getting rehab for an injury, and my job was to help them not lose their function and to lose their conditioning and get overweight and their blood pressure, just all those things. So if somebody is referred to me after physio, then what the role of a medical exercise specialist is to help restore function and to address some functional deficits that may have been left from physio.
Okay. So you've seen all these people. If someone's listening right now or watching right
Yeah.
What are the most common things you see that people could fix that they can start working on right now? Maybe something they could even do at home. What's something you see all the time? It's maybe a common few things, you know.
Probably the this like epidemic of postural defect, or from rounded shoulders to flattened lower backs to tight hamstrings and weak glutes. So any routine or anything that you could do to undo the sitting position,
Okay, yeah.
you know, that's huge. And because as you know, the body is like it's an integrated chain. So there's a chain, like a domino effect. If the shoulders are rounded and causing the upper back to round, it's causing the lower back to flatten, which means that the hips don't work the way they should be, which means there's extra stress on the knees. It goes down to the ankles. So the number one thing would be that I think probably everybody would be to address postural defects or postural issues. And working with musicians for many, many years, you know, who are hunched over keyboards or drums or guitars, it's very similar to somebody who's hunched over a computer all day long.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I used to actually, Joe, I from that years ago, I created a program that I sold, which was funded by the government. It was called Meeting the Physical Demands of Work.
Okay, yeah.
And so it was addressing things like this, you know, so very similar between a musician and a desk worker.
Cool. I never even thought about that. How musicians and desk workers might have similar problems.
Well, the thing is, if you think about it, if you're in your boot camp and you have somebody doing a plank and they're burning and it hurts, and all of a sudden they feel some stinging in their lower back or shoulder blades, they're going to stop, right? If you got a musician who's in a recording studio paying $1,000 a day, and there's a producer, and there's the rest of the band, and they're on a deadline, or somebody's working at a job at a desk, and they got a boss on their butt, and they're on a deadline, they're going to ignore those pain signals. They're going to work through it.
Yeah.
Right. So in a workout, they're going to go, you know, Joe, and you're going to say, yeah, probably stop. But the thing with musicians and with people who get into that zone and that flow is they're going to ignore it and just go, they're going to keep going through it regardless of whether it's going to hurt them or not.
I didn't think about that, man. That's cool. So we're going to get into kind of some personal questions now. So what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? This going to be personal or professional, either one or both, or whatever you want to address. Right?
That's a tough one. I was, you know, when I saw that your podcast was called Relentless Positivity, I thought, man, that's I come from a family that is, the glass is always half full. It's the most, we used to say that my mother was the most positive person we ever met, for sure. I mean, even when she had cancer at the end, even she was blind, she was just still doing stuff. She was like, yeah. So I said, this is the perfect podcast for me. So because of that, I was struggling because I don't think of failure in terms of failing anything. I'm like, but then I started to think about it. You know, there's a couple of things I remember a moment where I was being groomed to be the touchdown back, you know, the short yardage over the top through the middle. So I'd move away from the blocking role to the center, and I'm ready to shine. And they put me at the 1 yard line. We're in a preseason game, and it's between me and another guy. Get the ball. I start going over. The ball gets punched out. Remember, we have a 110-yard field in Canada. The ball gets punched out. I'm pinned under the linebacker, picks it up, goes 109 yards for a touchdown. And so that's a failure. And I thought, that's not it. But, you know, I think the thing where I learned the most was my business, the year where I had the most successful year that I've ever had in business in terms of a gross and the number of sessions, the number of work, the amount of work we were doing, I declared bankruptcy after that year.
Oh, wow.
So I had a professional bankruptcy at one point. We were so successful and doing so well on the floor and with people, but I was so new at and I had such terrible business systems in place.
This guy too.
Dude, I was doing, because remember I said I was doing a lot of insurance work.
Mm-hmm.
So when you I might work with you for a month and then mail. I don't think we were emailing it yet. We were mailing it a bill, which takes a while. So I might not get payment for you for 3 months. But meanwhile, I had a staff of trainers who I was paying every week or every other week. So the more work we got in, because we were doing good work, the more we got into debt as we went along.
Wow.
So all of my trainers were also independent contractors. We got a visit from it would be like the IRS, the CRA, so the Canada Revenue Agency. Nice guy, but he informed me that my contractors were actually working as employees because they were only working for me. So they flipped them all to employee status, which means that my expenses went up 20% immediately. Being a good guy, and I love my trainers and everything, I didn't cut anybody's salary. I absorbed it. So the hole kept getting deeper and deeper and bigger and bigger. So it was just an inescapable. My dad at this point was president of his company in New York State, and I took him my books, and I was showing him. I go, look, Joe, we did 1 month that year when I had to declare bankruptcy. We did a month. I recently looked it up. Of generated $32,000 of personal training,
Good.
and ended up going under that year. So it was really a bad scene. So we had back taxes to pay. I wasn't billing people on time. We were paying everything on time.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, it was probably the most positive, believe it or not, the best thing that ever happened. So at the end of that year, I closed that business. That was all Canadian Fitness. I rebranded as Ernie Schraymayr Fitness.
Okay.
I literally moved down the street. I rented the space for me. My clients all came with me. The gross was much smaller, but my net was many times greater.
And that's all that matters. Which
was an incredible lesson. Even during that year, by the way, during the bankruptcy year, I'm a newspaper columnist now. Mm-hmm. I had a column back then. I was also doing a weekly radio show that I was the fitness expert. I was doing a monthly TV show. So media stuff everywhere. So if you saw,
media darling, that's what you are.
If you walked in the door and you saw 5 trainers working with people, and then you turned on the TV and there I was, everything looked incredible, but it was underneath. It was the systems were like I heard you on another podcast talking about falling to the level of your systems rather than rising to the level of your goals. Well, the systems were wrong. They didn't work. I wasn't billing. I also hired an administrative assistant who was fantastic, but was not a money generating position. Mm-hmm. So instead of doing it myself, I offloaded it to her. I was also hired a bookkeeper that cost $1,000 a month to tell me that we were losing money every month. And so it just wasn't, I had a professional cleaner, all these things. So we grew too fast without having the systems to follow up on it. So really what I learned from that was I learned how to budget. I learned how to do proper billing structures, how to do billing systems, how to really make a really tight, lean and mean machine, right? Yeah. And so every year since then has been a greater year leading up to this pandemic year.
Right.
And it made it very, very, very simple to pivot. And this has been a great year. Yeah. So that failure was pretty.
So I say failure, but I always, I coach middle school football, and I tell our guys, either we win or we learn, right? There's no failures, especially at middle school level. Most of you guys are just learning the game, but hey, if you learn something, hey, we still win, right?
I got to tell you, so the relentless positivity thing. So I had to go monthly. Every month I had to go to a trustee in bankruptcy and deliver a check. Because they settle your debts, but then you have to go and pay it back in bits, right? Mm-hmm. So that one month I went in there, and the receptionist, she said, "I got to stop you for a second." I said, "What's up?" She says, "You come in here every month. You're like the most upbeat, happy, positive guy in bankruptcy I've ever met. Like, what's the deal?" And I said, "Well, instead of grumbling every month about the money I had to pay, to me, it represented one less month that I had until I was out of it, until my discharge." So I said, "Look, I'm working my way there." And I said to her, downstairs in their building there's a coffee shop that's run by this Greek lady who makes the most unbelievable white bean soup. And I said, every month when I come to give my check, I'm actually excited because I get to be 1 month closer and I get to have a bowl of her soup.
See, there you go.
So I linked it to something positive. And meanwhile, so they assign you a trustee, to work with you, and you learn how to set up the system. So when you're out of that, if you didn't screw around and you did your homework, you're ready to take off after. And so that was what happened. So it's been really good.
Cool. So what's your biggest challenge right now with what you're going through? What's your biggest challenge?
Right now, it's business is very good. Actually, I'm in a growth period, and it's been a really great year. I can't believe how normal it feels training people through a screen. It's really weird, but in a good way. The biggest challenge is managing having a line that marks work and home.
That's a big, I hear it from my clients all the time, that where there's no hard cutoff time at 5 o'clock, you leave the office or anything like that. It's just you can work all day if you want to.
Well, in my office, I mean, I'm in my, this is where I train people through the screen, but just over here, I've got all my guitars. I play guitar. That's where I play guitar. I've got, you know, I'm in this room hanging out as well. So it's like I'm always in here. Yeah. So that's been the hardest. And also being around, I mean, I love my family. I love them all, but just being around, and because the kids are home from, well, my daughter, she's away at college, but my son is home, but just everybody's together. And it feels weird having everybody at your work, and it's my work, right? So what I've done throughout this time was when I finish with clients, I don't, by the way, I'm very, very strict with when I book people. I don't work into the night with them. So when I'm done with work, I could stay in this room and still be in the same room. So what I do is I leave and I'll go for a walk and listen to a podcast and maybe go up, 40 minutes, an hour, go for a walk. And that's when I come back. It's like I'm coming home from work. Now I'm not at the same place anymore.
Yeah, that's it. You got to have that kind of hard reset. That's a good way to do it, where you just kind of, hey, we'll get back at it in a little while. So you've been doing this stuff for a long time now. What keeps you inspired? What's inspiring you right now?
That was a tough question to come up with as well. But I think the thing that inspires me the most is balance. So when I being in this line of work, I've seen some people who are so successful in one area and are complete disaster in another. And if you've ever spent time in either college, big time college, like I was in the Big Ten, or professional football, if you've ever been around football coaches at that level, these guys, they don't see their families. Some of them sleep on the couch in the meeting room. They're watching film till 4 a.m. They're back at 6 a.m. Yeah. A lot of them have high blood pressure. They got bad backs. They got fat stomachs. There's stress cases. You might take, you have somebody winning championships and he's got no life balance. Right. On the other hand, I've had some other clients who are incredibly successful in work and in home life. And listen to this. There was one client, I was driving to see him early in the morning when I was still doing home visits. And I happened to pick up the newspaper and it was sitting on my car seat. And I looked over. I was on my way to this guy's house. And I looked over and I said, wow. And his picture's there. And he had just sold his business company for $68 million or something like that. So I'm like, I guess I got to raise my rates. So I show up at his house, same guy, still training. He's going to the movies with his wife. He's going to his kids' game on the weekend. He does his things. He still works, but it's balanced. And it's just watching, I have 2 clients who are, they're retired now. They're in their 70s, the most physically fit 70-year-olds I've ever met, and the most fiscally sound. So
see, that's goals right there. That's goals.
Retired. They retired with their health and with some wealth, and they travel and so many people I know that come to me, because everybody comes to me with frustration. Mm-hmm. They don't come to me because things are working. They come because there's a problem to be solved. So, they may have incredible success. They've got money, they got nice cars, they got a home down south, but they got a bad back, they can't walk, they got high blood pressure, and it's out of balance. So for me, the thing that inspires me the most is finding people and seeing people who actually have that life balance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I like that. Hey, it's no use having all this money if you don't have your health, right?
On the other hand, I've known people who are fit and strong and active, and they can't afford to go away for a weekend. So it's balance, right?
Yeah, find that balance. So I know you're a curious guy. You're into a lot of different things. Well, what are you most curious about right now?
Probably like a lot of people, this weird place that we are in, the divide in society with philosophies, the right, the left, whatever you want to call it. I don't even, that's a really an American term, the right and the left. That's a lot of fighting.
Oh, a hot mess is what I call it. It's just a hot mess. It's just a hot mess right now.
Well, and I'm not saying just the US. You look around the world, and just the way that I read a lot, I watch a lot. I'm really kind of a bit of a history buff too, and just seeing that history is repeating itself in so many places, and you just, it's like there's this weird, curious thing where you're thinking, how can we be getting to this place again? That to me, I'm curious about that. And it's kind of depressing in a way, but it goes back to, but thinking about it, it goes back to balance, right? So you can't, if you have one, you have communism in one end and you have fascism in the other side, and you've got these extremes, right?
Yeah.
And
we go from here, right?
Yeah, it's kind of sad in the way that there's no respect for either side, either way. I don't know, we're getting away from fitness and all that, but that's something I just look at. That's the extreme, and I don't know if it's because of social media or because of the internet or whatever, but just people being entrenched and being unwilling to budge in either direction.
Yeah.
That's
this next one is changing gears. So what's your favorite restaurant? And when I go there, because I'm going to go there one day, what do I need to get when I go there?
That's difficult. That's a hard one. I mean, I'm a foodie. My whole family, how much of a foodie family I come from? We could be sitting, one time we were sitting at Christmas dinner where everybody had brought something. And I'm talking about they're all show-offs. We're making all kinds of fancy stuff. And you know what we were talking about? What we're having tomorrow. And I looked over and somebody at the table was showing pictures from last year's stuff we made. We're so excited about it. So that's hard. So I don't know, favorite restaurant, I'm going to go with a couple. I can't pick just one.
Yeah, you do your own thing.
Amazing. So there's always a tie to something you grew up with. And so, I can think of the fanciest, most incredible place I've been. But when I get back to Montreal, back to my home, I pull in to Lafleur's and I get 2 steamies with coleslaw and some fries on the side. So steamies are steamed hot dogs.
Okay.
An all dressed hot dog in Quebec or in Montreal, it's mustard, relish, and coleslaw. And if you ask for ketchup, they look at you, give you the stink eye, and then.
Some people slap you. You try to put ketchup on a hot dog, they'll slap you. You gotta be careful.
Lafleur's, that's a comfort thing. But in Montreal, Schramayr, so it's a family name. It's a deli. It's like a Jewish deli that I grew up with. If you go there, you got to get the medium fat smoked meat on rye bread with mustard, just yellow mustard, and the fries and a kosher pickle on the side.
Kosher pickle. That ties it all together, right?
That's beautiful. Yeah. So it's and you know what, that was the place where, in high school, or we'd be there at 4 a.m, pooling our money to get, what I'm talking about. So it's comfort food. It's a great place. It's got the old Naugahyde. It's kind of like where Harry met Sally, with the Katz's Deli there. So something like that. So that's just a nice pull. But because of what the situation we're in and we can't travel, place where I'd love to go. I went to New York City a couple of years ago with a buddy, and we ran all over town. And we were in the village going to the Blue Note Jazz Club to see Dizzy Gillespie's all-star band. And we popped into a sushi place, the best sushi I've ever had in my life. I'd love to go back there. That's it. I don't remember the name of it, but it was I love sushi, and that would be cool.
That's cool. All right, so this next one, I'm gonna try and guess your nickname. So I probably could have done some research and found your nickname, but I got 3 guesses. None of them are correct, but I'm gonna tell them to you anyway. Number 1, the Purdue Punisher. Is that correct?
No.
The Hamilton Hammer.
No.
No. Mike Alstott Sr. No. No. What's your nickname? Those are my terrible guesses. What was your nickname? You may have had a few back in the day.
It's a weird nick. It's okay. My name is Schramayr. It's the last name. Americans like to say Schramayr.
Yeah, I'm very nervous about saying that.
And when I played football, even in Canada here, it was easier for people to say Schramayr than Schramayr for whatever reason. So when I was a teenager, I was crushing it in football at every level as a kid, and I was in the paper a lot, and the reporter, because we actually, our games were televised for a while, some of the games, and the announcer couldn't pronounce my name. He called me Schramayr. So then one of the reporters for the newspaper just called me the Shoe.
The Shoe.
So the Shoe. So there would be headlines in the newspaper: the Shoe runs for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns or something. And it wouldn't even say my name. It would just say the Shoe. And in the article, it would say Ernie the Shoe Schramayr. And then throughout the rest of the article, it would just say the Shoe. So I to this day, if somebody from Montreal from that period calls me, "Hey, what's up, Shoe?" They still call me Shoe. So that stuck.
Yeah, it's kind of a roundabout way to get a nickname, right? So that's
the Shoe. But the whole nickname is the Shoe, but people just call me Shoe.
That's cool.
So it comes from a mispronunciation of my last name.
That's how the greatest ones start, right? So you're just
Yeah.
messing something up. So we kind of want to talk a little bit. We'll just kind of wrap up here a little while, a little bit about the power of perspectives. I know you're a guy. You've covered it even when you're in bankruptcy. You talked about coming in there, and you could have gone and moped every time you brought that in, and but probably who that she sees all the time, right? But you came in there with that. So tell us more about how the power of perspective.
The whole thing. I have people tell me all the time. They say to me, "How are you so positive, and how are you always upbeat and everything?" And it 100% it comes from I'll say 70% from my mom, 30% from my dad, 50-50, I don't know. But from my parents, absolutely. And mostly from my mother. I was saying before, my parents were German immigrants. They lived through World War II. My mom was born in 1930 in the middle of Nazi Germany in Nuremberg, where the rallies were held, where the trials were at the end. So her house actually that she grew up in was taken over by the troops. They had set up a radar early alert system in upstairs in the house, so that when they would see that the bombers were coming over, they would run and tell the neighbors, and they would all get in the bomb. So she was in a bomb shelter, I don't know, 5 years, being bombed every night by the Lancaster bombers coming from England. During the day, she tells us, she was telling. So a lot of people who grew up during that period and lived through that, they don't like to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that a lot from soldiers and that. My parents talked about it all the time, right? I grew up hearing the stories always. So during the day, they'd be walking to school, and my sisters and I would say, whoa, she still went to school? You're bombed all night. So on the way to school, the American planes would fly in, they would shoot anything that was on the road. So at night they were bombed, during the day they were shot at. So I've heard these stories my whole life, like from what they went through. My mom had an expression, she said, we were in a restaurant one time, and the waitress was dinking around. It was a really bad service, and a couple of people were getting, you know how people get, they're pissed off. And my mother said, we're sitting here, we're waiting for this amazing. She said, if we're not getting bombed and we're not starving, then everything's all right.
That's perspective.
So I grew up with, that's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
If you're not being bombed and you're not starving, then everything's okay.
When you start with that as a baseline?
If you start with that as a baseline, that's it. Everything's fine. So, it occurred to me, my wife and I, during this past year, we're not going to restaurants. My wife has MS, by the way. And so she's more vulnerable, her immunity and all that. So we really have been staying home. But, we're trying to support local business. So we're ordering food in and things like that. So one night we're sitting on the front porch and having a glass of wine, nice bottle of wine we picked up, waiting for our gourmet food to be delivered to our door and handed to us before we go downstairs to decide which movie from which streaming service we watch on our big screen TV with the surround sound, right? And then, what the Raptors are playing, you know what, we'll just put it on PVR. We'll watch it afterwards. That's fine. So we're thinking when you hear these people so upset because they can't go to a ball game or they can't go to a movie or they say it's like living through a war. It's not like living through a war. And so I know I'm very fortunate that I haven't lost my job and that it's actually been a very good year. So I get it. It's not everybody's in the same boat. I get it. But it's, the perspective of thinking about people who were going through what my parents went through and then looking what we actually still have, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with the fact that
I'm bombed all week. Nobody's bombed me all week. So I've been
bombed, and I'm actually starving right now, but that's that's because I've been working all day.
You're like me, yeah. That's a great way to look at it. And now I'm going to bring it down now because I got to tell you a dad joke. So, and then we'll wrap.
You know what? The only reason I'm here, the reason I'm here is for the dad joke.
Well,
and just to let you know, when I discovered these dad jokes, my wife and I sat on the couch one night and flipped through a whole bunch of them, and they get better.
The best ones are when everyone just groans. That's my absolute favorite. And if some of them get mad. When they get mad, that's when it's really good.
You need a violin to hold on to, like Henny Youngman had. He was the king of these jokes.
All right, this is a special Canadian one. So I just found out that Canada isn't real. Turns out it's maple leaf. Are you groaning inside? All right, so that's only Canada one I can think of. But hey, man, if someone wants to work with you or just reach out to you, I know they can find your work online with the Hamilton newspaper. What else? How could they work with you?
Well, you know what? Because of the way that I work now, primarily it's through the screen. I've had amazing success stories with some people this year who I've never even met in person. It's all been like the assessment, everything has been through the screen. So email me. It's Ernie's Fitness World. So ERNIES fitnessworld@gmail.com.
Okay.
You can reach out to me. They can email me there. Check out my website at it's erniesfitnessworld.com. And it used to be Ernie Schraymayr Fitness. And you can imagine why it changed to Ernie's Fitness World. So it's erniesfitnessworld.com, or email me at erniesfitnessworld@gmail.com. I've worked with people virtually for several months now. I've in the past, I've worked with people, just doing consults over the phone and then emailing them workouts that they follow along that way. You can find my work, my writing at thespec.ca.
Okay. And I'll link all the stuff in the show notes if they
sure.
remember all that, but I just wanted to hear it from your own mouth.
Yeah, the best, if somebody wanted to work with me long distance like that, we'd be doing virtual. And I mean, if they're across the country, it's the same as if they're across the street, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to you starting your podcast, the All Canadian Positivity Podcast. So I'm looking forward to that when I get going. So
hey, I got to tell you, Joe, this has been a goal and a dream. I won't say it's a dream. I guess it's kind of a dream, as my friend and I and some of my clients, my sister, are really big podcast listeners and just love. So when I told them I was going to be on, they were really excited.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being on, and can't wait to see this thing come and get the results back to listeners. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, Joe. I love it. Thank you.